Jiho pressed his hand against the cold glass of the observation deck and watched the stars drift past. He had been working on Meridian 7 for 3 years now, studying samples from distant worlds and cataloging alien life forms. It was quiet work, the kind he preferred. No drama, no politics, just him and the mysteries of biology waiting to be understood. That piece ended the moment the Velthuran ship arrived. The vessel was massive, shaped like a crescent moon made of dark metal that seemed to drink in the light around it. Jiho had read about the Velthurans in the database. They were one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy, powerful and proud. They had never shown much interest in humans before. Their arrival now meant something important was happening. Commander Taman called an emergency meeting in the main conference room. Jiho sat quietly in the back while the commander explained the situation. The Velthurans wanted to discuss an alliance. They were sending their chief negotiator to the station. Everyone needed to be on their best behavior. One wrong move could destroy any chance of friendship between the two species. Jiho barely listened. He was thinking about the biological samples waiting in his lab. But then Taman said something that caught his attention. The Velthurans have strange customs. They use something called vulnerability protocols to build trust. We don't know exactly what that means, but we need to be respectful. Dr. Jiho, since you're our xenobiologist, you'll be part of the greeting committee. Jiho nodded slowly. He didn't particularly want to be involved in politics, but he was curious about meeting a Velthuran in person. He had only seen pictures and videos before. The next day, Ara stepped off her shuttle and into the docking bay. Jiho forgot to breathe for a moment. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin that shimmered between deep purple and midnight blue depending on how the light hit it. Her eyes were large and dark with flecks of silver that caught the overhead lights. She wore elaborate robes made of fabric that seemed to move on its own, flowing around her like water. She was beautiful in a way that was completely alien, and Jiho found himself fascinated. Taman stepped forward and offered the formal greeting they had practiced. Ara responded in perfect English, her voice deep and melodic. She studied each human in the greeting party with those silver-flecked eyes. When her gaze landed on Jiho, he didn't look away. He met her eyes and nodded politely. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe. It was hard to tell. The first formal meeting happened 2 hours later in Conference Room A. Ara sat across from the human delegation, her robes spread around her like the petals of some enormous flower. She explained that the Velthurans were interested in opening trade routes and sharing technology, but first they needed to establish trust. "My people have a tradition," Ara said, her fingers touching the edge of her outer robe. "We show openness through progressive revelation. We remove the layers we hide behind one by one to prove we have nothing to conceal. It is how we build true understanding." Taman shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "What exactly does that involve?" "I would remove my ceremonial layers," Ara said calmly, "one after another over several meetings. It is a sign of respect and vulnerability. Most species find it uncomfortable. They leave before the protocol is complete." Jiho leaned forward slightly. "Why do they leave?" Ara's eyes fixed on him. "Because vulnerability is frightening. Because seeing someone strip away their defenses, their armor, their privacy, it demands something in return. It demands that you stay present, that you witness, that you acknowledge the trust being offered. Most species are not brave enough for that." "That's not bravery," Jiho said quietly. "That's just paying attention." The room went silent. Ara stared at him with an expression he couldn't read. Taman shot Jiho a warning look, but Jiho wasn't trying to be provocative. He was simply being honest. The meeting ended soon after. Ara said she needed time to prepare for the next session. Taman pulled Jiho aside once she was gone. "What were you thinking?" the commander demanded. "I was answering her question," Jiho said. "You can't just say whatever comes to mind. This is delicate diplomacy." Jiho nodded, but he wasn't really listening. He was thinking about what Ara had said about vulnerability and bravery. It reminded him of his research, of how you had to approach alien life forms with patience and openness. You couldn't understand something new if you brought fear and prejudice to the table. The second meeting happened 3 days later. This time, Ara removed her outer ceremonial robe, revealing a layer of lighter fabric beneath. The gesture seemed simple, but Jiho could see the tension in her shoulders. This meant something to her. It was costing her something to do this in front of strangers. Taman kept the conversation professional, discussing trade agreements and technology exchanges. But Jiho noticed Ara kept glancing at him as if trying to figure something out. The third meeting was when everything changed. Only 4 humans attended this time: Taemin, 2 diplomatic staff, and Jiho. Ara entered the room wearing only 3 layers now instead of her original 7. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the clasp of the next layer. She paused and looked directly at Jiho. "I must ask you something, human. The others may leave if they wish, but I need your answer. Will you stay if I disrobe? Will you remain here and bear witness to this tradition, knowing what it means for my people?" Taemin started to stand, ready to excuse everyone, but Jiho spoke first. "If that's your custom for building trust, then I'll stay. Understanding you is more important than my comfort." The diplomatic staff looked shocked. Taemin's face went pale, but Ara's expression transformed into something Jiho couldn't quite name. Wonder, perhaps, or fear, or maybe both. She removed the next layer slowly, revealing more of herself. Not in a provocative way, but in a way that was deeply personal. Jiho watched calmly, his face neutral and respectful. He wasn't uncomfortable. He was simply present, just as she had asked. When the meeting ended, Ara stood and approached him. She was so tall that Jiho had to look up to meet her eyes. "You understood what you accepted?" she asked softly. "I'm beginning to," Jiho replied. "You're asking me to see you as you are, without the armor of ceremony and distance. That's not uncomfortable. That's honest." Ara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something in her own language, something that sounded like a blessing or a prayer. She left without translating it. Later, Dami found Jiho in his lab. She was the station's cultural liaison, and she looked worried. "Do you know what you just did?" she asked. "I accepted an invitation to understand someone different from me," Jiho said, examining a slide under his microscope. "Jiho, the Veltharan vulnerability protocol isn't just ceremonial. It's the first step in a bonding process. It has biological and social implications. You might have just initiated something that can't be undone." Jiho looked up from his microscope. "Did I misunderstand?" "No," Dami admitted. "That's what worries me." "I think you understood perfectly." "And you said yes anyway." Jiho turned back to his work, but his mind was on Ara, on her silver-flecked eyes and the trembling of her hands, on the weight of trust she had offered him. "Then I made the right choice," he said quietly. Dami shook her head and left him alone with his thoughts. Outside the window, the Veltharan ship hung in space like a dark moon, full of mysteries waiting to be understood. Jiho smiled slightly. Maybe politics wasn't so different from biology after all. Both required patience, openness, and the courage to see things as they truly were. The summons arrived at dawn. A formal message from the Veltharan High Council, transmitted directly to Meridian 7's command center. Commander Taemin read it 3 times before calling Jiho to his office. "They want you to complete the 7 trials of the bonding path," Taemin said, pushing the translated document across his desk. "They say if you fail even one, it will be considered a grave insult. Relations between humans and Veltharans will be permanently damaged." Jiho scanned the document. The trials had names like the Trial of Shadows and the Trial of Empty Hands. No detailed descriptions were provided, only a warning that each trial would test a different aspect of his commitment and sincerity. "You need to decline," Taemin said firmly. "This is too risky. The political fallout—" "I accept," Jiho interrupted. "You're not listening. If you fail, you don't just embarrass yourself. You embarrass all of humanity. Every future negotiation with the Veltharans will be poisoned by this. You're putting the entire alliance at risk." "I'm aware of the stakes," Jiho said calmly, "but I'm not backing down. Ara offered me her trust. The least I can do is prove I'm worthy of it." Taemin leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "This isn't about one alien diplomat, Jiho. This is about the future of our species in the galaxy." "Maybe that's exactly what this is about," Jiho replied. "Maybe the future of our species depends on whether we're brave enough to truly connect with others, even when it's difficult. Even when it's risky." The commander stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. "You're going to do this no matter what I say, aren't you?" "Yes. Then God help us all." The first trial began the next day. Jiho was taken to a chamber deep inside the Veltharan ship. Ara was there, but she stood in the corner with 3 other Veltharan officials forbidden from speaking or interfering. Her face was carefully neutral, but Jiho could see the tension in her posture. The trial of shadows began without warning. The room darkened and suddenly Jiho was surrounded by projections. They weren't just images. They were fully immersive hallucinations created by Veltheran technology. He saw his worst fears come to life around him. He saw his family's colony ship exploding again, the same accident that had killed his parents when he was 12. He saw himself floating alone in the void, unreachable and forgotten. He saw Ara turning away from him with disgust, rejecting him as every other species had rejected the Veltherans. The projections felt real. His heart raced. His breathing quickened. But Jiho forced himself to remember what this was, a test. The Veltherans wanted to know if his fears would make him run. He closed his eyes and steadied his breathing. When he opened them again, he looked at each projection calmly. "These are my fears," he said aloud, "but they don't control me. I've already lost people I loved. I've already been alone. And I'm still here. I'm still reaching out. I'm still trying to connect." The shadows dissolved. The room lights returned. One of the Veltharan officials made a mark on a data pad. Jiho had passed the first trial. The trial of empty hands came 3 days later. Jiho was led to a room containing a single table with various objects on it. Advanced technology, valuable resources, even vials of what looked like medical treatments. A Veltharan elder explained the trial in a flat voice. "Take what you wish from this table. These are things your species needs. Things that could advance your civilization by decades. All we ask is that you take them. Show us what you truly want from us." Jiho understood the trap immediately. The Veltharans were testing whether he wanted things from them or simply wanted to know them. He walked to the table, looked at each object carefully, then stepped back. "I don't want any of this," he said. "You refuse our gifts?" the elder asked, and there was something sharp in the question. "I refuse to reduce this to a transaction," Jiho replied. "You're not a vendor. I'm not a customer. If we're going to build something between our peoples, it has to be based on more than what we can take from each other." The elder's expression remained unreadable, but another mark went on the data pad. 2 trials passed. The trial of silence was the hardest yet. Jiho was placed in a room with Ara, but neither of them was allowed to speak or gesture. They simply had to sit together for 6 hours. No communication, no interaction, just presence. At first it was uncomfortable. Jiho wanted to ask Ara how she was doing, wanted to talk about the trials, wanted to know what she was thinking. But as the hours passed, he found a strange peace in the silence. He watched the way she breathed, the small shifts in her posture, the occasional flicker of expression across her face. He was learning to read her without words, and he realized she was doing the same with him. She was studying him, learning his patterns, his habits, his silences. They were communicating without speaking, building understanding through pure observation and presence. When the 6 hours ended, they both stood simultaneously, as if they'd agreed on it without words. The Veltharan observer made another mark. 3 trials complete. The trial of fire came next, but it wasn't literal fire. Instead, Jiho was subjected to intense questioning by a panel of Veltharan officials. They demanded to know his intentions, his motives, his secrets. They asked about human history, about wars and betrayals, about every dark thing humanity had ever done. They were trying to make him defensive, trying to make him lash out or shut down. Jiho answered every question honestly. He didn't defend humanity's mistakes or try to pretend they were better than they were. "Yes, we've done terrible things," he said. "We've hurt each other and destroyed our own world in places. We're far from perfect. But we're trying to be better. We're trying to learn. Isn't that what matters? Not where we've been, but where we're trying to go." The panel dismissed him without comment. But the mark went on the data pad. 4 trials passed. The 5th trial was called the Trial of Shared Suffering, and it was the one Ara had been dreading. She knew what was coming because she would have to participate. The council's rules required it. Jiho and Ara were brought to a medical chamber. A Veltharan scientist explained the procedure in clinical terms. They would be connected through a neural link. They would experience each other's most painful memories directly. There was no way to fake it, no way to hide. Everything would be laid bare. "This is the true test of the vulnerability protocol," the scientist said. "Showing your surface is easy. Showing your depths, that takes courage." Ara's hands trembled as the neural connectors were placed on her temples. Jiho reached out instinctively to steady her, and she didn't pull away. Their eyes met. "I'm ready," Jiho said quietly. The connection activated. Jiho was suddenly inside Era's mind, experiencing her life. He felt her childhood loneliness, always being groomed for leadership, but never allowed close friendships. He felt the weight of expectations, the constant pressure to be perfect, to represent her people flawlessly. He felt her isolation at the top of the diplomatic hierarchy, respected but never truly known. Everyone saw her as a symbol, never as a person. And he felt her desperate hope when he had agreed to stay, when he had seen her as Ara rather than as a Veltharan diplomat. The hope that terrified her because she had never felt it before. The pain of that loneliness hit Jiho like a physical blow. He had thought his own isolation after his parents' death was hard, but Ara had been alone her entire life. Surrounded by people but completely alone. Then the connection reversed and Ara was in his mind. She experienced the colony accident. The moment 12-year-old Jiho realized his parents weren't coming back. She felt the grief that had shaped him, the determination to never let others experience such isolation. She felt his genuine curiosity about the universe, his need to understand and connect, his belief that reaching out was always worth the risk. She felt the moment he had looked at her for the first time and seen a person, not an alien. She felt how much he wanted to know her, not for any political gain, but simply because she was worth knowing. When the connection ended, they were both shaking. Tears ran down Ara's face. Jiho hadn't known Veltharans could cry. His own eyes were wet. The Veltharan scientist made a note, and her expression was troubled. "There's an anomaly," she said. "A partial empathic bond has formed. This shouldn't be possible between different species." One of the council members who had been observing leaned forward. "Explain." "They can sense each other's emotional states now. The bond is incomplete, but it's there. This has never happened before." The room erupted in rapid Veltharan speech. Jiho couldn't follow most of it, but he could feel Ara's fear and confusion through the new connection. He could sense her worry about what this meant. He reached out and took her hand. The physical contact strengthened the emotional connection, and he tried to project calm and reassurance. He wasn't afraid of this bond. He welcomed it. Ara's fingers tightened around his. Through the link, he felt her fear begin to transform into something else. Not quite hope. Not quite trust. But the beginning of both. The council member who had been leading the trials stood abruptly. "This changes nothing. 2 trials remain. The human will complete them, or the bonding process ends and relations cease. The council has spoken." But as Jiho was led from the chamber, he felt Ara's emotions through the bond, and he knew she didn't want the trials to end. She wanted to see where this impossible connection might lead. The news spread through both human and Veltharan communication channels within hours. A human had accepted the vulnerability protocol. A human had agreed to witness the disrobing ritual. For the first time in Veltharan history, an alien species had not fled from their most sacred tradition. Jiho didn't understand why everyone was making such a big deal about it. He had simply agreed to stay in a room and pay attention. That seemed like basic courtesy to him. Dami didn't see it that way. She cornered him in the cafeteria the next morning, sliding her tray across from his with enough force to make his coffee slosh. "We need to talk about what you did," she said. "I had breakfast?" Jiho offered, gesturing at his half-eaten meal. "You know what I mean. The Veltharan Council is asking questions. They want to know if you understood the cultural significance of what you accepted. They think maybe there was a translation error." Jiho set down his fork. "There was no translation error. Ara spoke perfect English, that's not what I mean. They think maybe you misunderstood what the ritual represents. The vulnerability protocol isn't just about respect, Jiho. For Veltharans, it's the beginning of a profound bond. It creates a connection between 2 people that has biological markers. Brain chemistry changes. Emotional regulation synchronizes. It's not just symbolic." "I read about that," Jiho said calmly. Dami stared at him. "You read about it? And you still said yes. Yes, why?" Jiho was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain. "When I study a new organism, I have to approach it without assumptions. I have to be willing to let it show me what it is, not what I expect it to be. Ara was offering to show me who her people really are, beneath all the ceremony and distance. How could I say no to that? Because it's not just about learning, Jiho. You're becoming part of something you might not be able to step away from. The bond, if it forms completely, it's permanent." "I know," Jiho said. He picked up his fork again and returned to his breakfast, signaling the conversation was over. Dami left, shaking her head. but Jiho could see the worry in her eyes. She was a good friend. She was trying to protect him. But some things were worth the risk. Meanwhile, on the Veltharan ship, Ara sat in her private quarters staring at the communication terminal. Messages from the High Council filled her screen, each one more demanding than the last. They wanted explanations. They wanted proof of the humans' intentions. They wanted to know if she had been deceived, but Ara wasn't sure how to answer them because she wasn't sure herself. Jiho's acceptance had been genuine. She could feel it in the way he looked at her, steady and calm without fear or judgment. No one had ever looked at her like that before. Not even her own people. She had spent her entire life as a diplomat, trained to read intentions and detect deception. Every species she had ever negotiated with had wanted something from her people: technology, resources, protection. They smiled and made promises, but their eyes always gave them away. They saw the Veltharans as tools to be used. Jiho had looked at her like she was a person. Not a tool, not a means to an end. Just someone worth knowing. That frightened her more than she wanted to admit. She accessed the human cultural database and began researching. She read about human psychology, their history, their art, and literature. What she found surprised her. Humans had a strange capacity for empathy that seemed to extend beyond their own species. They formed bonds with animals, with machines, even with fictional characters in their stories. They seemed to genuinely care about understanding things that were different from themselves. It was inefficient. It was impractical. It left them vulnerable to betrayal and disappointment. It was also beautiful in a way Ara had never encountered before. 3 days passed before Ara returned to the station for their next scheduled meeting. This time she requested a private session with Jiho alone. Taman objected, but Jiho agreed before the commander could refuse on his behalf. They met in a small observation room overlooking the planet below. Ara arrived wearing only 2 ceremonial layers now. She was progressing through the protocol faster than tradition required. Jiho wondered if she was testing him, trying to see when he would break and leave. He had no intention of leaving. "I have been studying your people," Ara said, standing at the window with her back to him. "And I've been studying yours," Jiho replied from his seat. "What have you learned?" she asked. "That you value strength and self-sufficiency. That you've survived as a civilization for thousands of years, by never showing weakness to potential threats. That the vulnerability protocol is sacred because it goes against every survival instinct your people have developed." Ara turned to face him. "Then why did you accept it?" "Because you offered it," Jiho said simply. "Because you were brave enough to show that vulnerability, and it would have been cowardly of me to reject it." "Most species do reject it," Ara said. "They see our ritual as a test or a trap. They think we're trying to manipulate them." "Are you?" "No." The word came out sharp and certain. "The vulnerability protocol is the only honest thing we have. Everything else is diplomacy and strategy. But this," she gestured to her reduced layers, "this is truth." Jiho stood and walked to the window beside her. "Then I'm honored you shared it with me." They stood in silence for a while, watching the planet rotate slowly beneath them. Ara spoke again, softer this time. "I don't understand your species. You're so fragile. Your lifespans are short. Your bodies are weak. You have no natural defenses. By all logic, you should be terrified of everything in the galaxy. But instead you reach out. You want to connect. You want to understand. It makes no sense." "Maybe that's exactly why we do it," Jiho said. "We're fragile and short-lived, so we can't afford to spend our time afraid and alone. We have to take risks. We have to trust. Otherwise, what's the point?" Ara looked at him with those silver-flecked eyes, and Jiho saw something shift in her expression. Like a wall coming down, like armor being set aside. "The Council wants proof that your intentions are honorable," she said. "They're going to issue a challenge. 7 more trials, each designed to test your resolve and your sincerity. If you fail any of them, it will be considered an insult to our entire civilization. The alliance talks will end. Your people's reputation will be damaged. And if I succeed," Ara hesitated, "if you succeed, the bond will be complete. You and I will be connected in ways that transcend language and culture. It's never happened between different species before. We don't know what it would mean." "That doesn't sound like a reason to refuse," Jiho said. "That sounds like a reason to try." Ara made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You're either the bravest human I've ever met or the most foolish." "Probably both." Jiho admitted with a small smile. She studied him for a long moment, then removed her outer layer. Beneath it, she wore something simpler, less ornate, more real. I'm not allowed to help you with the trials. The council has forbidden it, but I want you to know I hope you succeed. Why? Jiho asked. Ara was quiet, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because no one has ever seen me the way you do. Without fear, without wanting something from me, just seeing me. Jiho understood then. The vulnerability protocol wasn't just about showing herself to him. It was about being seen, being known, being acknowledged as more than just a representative of her species or a tool for political gain. I see you, Ara, he said quietly, and I'm not going anywhere. She closed her eyes, and Jiho could see the tension leave her shoulders. When she opened them again, there was something different in her gaze. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of trust. They talked for another hour, about small things and large things, about their worlds and their work. It was the first real conversation they'd had, beyond protocol and formality, and when Ara finally left, Jiho felt something shift inside him too. This wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. This wasn't just about understanding an alien species for scientific curiosity. This was about Ara, about knowing her, about being someone she could trust with her truth. And Jiho was willing to face whatever trials the council threw at him to make that happen. Outside the window, the stars burned cold and distant. But inside that small observation room, something warm had begun to grow. The sixth trial was called the Trial of Unity, and it was different from all the others. Instead of testing Jiho alone, it required both him and Ara to work together. They were placed in a complex simulation chamber where they had to navigate a series of challenges that required perfect coordination. The catch was that they couldn't speak to each other. They had to rely entirely on the empathic bond. At first, it was clumsy. Jiho would feel Ara's intention to move left, but by the time he processed it and responded, the moment had passed. They stumbled through the first few obstacles, barely succeeding. But gradually they found a rhythm. Jiho stopped trying to think through what he was feeling from Ara and just trusted it. He let his body respond to her emotions instinctively, and suddenly they were moving like they shared one mind. When Ara needed support, Jiho was there before she asked. When Jiho needed guidance, Ara provided it through pure feeling. They flowed through the simulation like water, perfectly synchronized. The Veltheran observers watched in silence. This level of coordination between different species should have been impossible, but it was happening right in front of them. When the trial ended, Jiho and Ara stood together, breathing hard, covered in sweat. They looked at each other and started laughing. The joy bubbling up through the bond was infectious, feeding back and forth between them until they were both grinning like children. A Veltheran council member stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral. You have completed 6 of the 7 trials. Only the final binding remains. But given the current political situation, the council recommends postponing until— No, Ara said firmly. We continue as scheduled. The Krell threat is real, the council member protested. We have intelligence suggesting they may attempt to disrupt the final trial. Your safety cannot be guaranteed. Then we proceed with increased security, Ara replied. But we do not delay. This bond deserves to be completed properly, not hidden away in fear. The council member looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Ara's stance stopped her. This was no longer the obedient diplomat who always followed orders. This was someone who had found something worth fighting for. Very well, the council member said coldly. The final binding will commence in 3 days. May your choice bring honor to our people. The way she said it made it clear she didn't think it would. The next 2 days passed in a blur of security preparations. Yuno, the human security chief, worked with Veltheran guards to secure Meridian 7. Every ship approaching the station was scanned. Every visitor was vetted. The tension was unbearable. Through it all, Jiho and Ara stayed connected through the bond. They spent long hours talking, learning about each other's lives and dreams. Ara told Jiho about growing up on the Veltheran homeworld, about the weight of expectations and the loneliness of leadership. Jiho told her about his parents, about choosing to study alien life because he wanted to build bridges, not walls. Did you know from the beginning? Ara asked during one of their late-night conversations. Did you understand that accepting the vulnerability protocol would lead to all of this? Jiho considered the question carefully. I suspected it might be significant, but I couldn't have known it would go this far. I just knew that you were offering me something real and rare, a chance to truly understand someone different from me. How could I say no to that? Most beings would have said no, Ara replied. Most beings would have seen the risk and walked away. Then I guess humans are different, Jiho said with a small smile. We'd rather try and fail than never try at all. That's what makes us human. Through the bond, Ara felt the truth of his words, the fundamental optimism and courage that seemed to define humanity. It was so different from the Veltheran way, which valued caution and self-preservation above all else. But maybe that difference was exactly what the galaxy needed. The third day arrived. The final binding was scheduled for noon in a ceremonial chamber on the Veltheran ship. Jiho dressed carefully in formal human attire, his hands only shaking slightly as he fastened the buttons. Through the bond, he felt Ara's matching nervousness. Dami found him before he left. Are you sure about this? She asked. I've never been more sure of anything, Jiho replied. The political fallout could be enormous. The Krell situation could escalate. Your life is going to change in ways you can't predict. I know. Jiho turned to face her, but some things are worth the risk. Ara is worth the risk. Dami pulled him into a quick hug. Then go, and be happy. The shuttle ride to the Veltheran ship felt both too long and too short. Jiho's mind raced with thoughts and feelings, his own and Ara's tangled together through the bond. When he stepped into the ceremonial chamber, he saw her waiting for him. She wore a simple white garment, no ceremonial layers at all. This was Ara stripped of all pretense, all armor, just herself, vulnerable and real. She was breathtaking. The Veltheran Council sat in an arc around the chamber, observing with expressions ranging from disapproval to cautious curiosity. One of them, a younger member named Hierin, looked almost hopeful. The ceremony began with ancient Veltheran words that Jiho didn't understand, but he felt their significance through Ara's emotions. This was a sacred moment, a tradition thousands of years old, and they were changing it forever by including a human. The final step of the binding required them to stand face to face, hands joined, while a neural connection was established. Unlike the temporary connection from the trial of shared suffering, this one would be permanent. They would be bonded for life. Are you ready? The ceremony leader asked. Jiho looked into Ara's silver-flecked eyes and saw his own reflection there. Yes, the connection activated. This time it wasn't painful. It was like coming home. Jiho felt himself merge with Ara's consciousness, not losing himself but expanding to include her. All her memories, all her emotions, all her hopes and fears became part of him, and she took in all of him as well. He saw how she had grown up lonely and isolated, trained from childhood to be perfect. He saw the moment she first saw him and felt curiosity instead of superiority. He saw how she had fought against her own counsel to continue the trials, how she had chosen him over everything her culture had taught her to value. And Ara saw Jiho's life too. The grief of losing his parents, the determination to make sure others never felt alone, the genuine wonder he felt when looking at alien life forms, the moment he saw her and thought she was beautiful even though, especially because she was so different from anything he'd known. When the connection stabilized, they were both crying. But they were also smiling. The bond is complete, the ceremony leader announced, and there was shock in his voice. A human and a Veltheran bonded for life. This has never... An alarm cut through the ceremony. Red lights flashed. Chunho's voice came over the comm system, urgent and sharp. We have incoming hostile ships. Krell vessels decloaking at the station perimeter. This is not a drill. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Council members rushed for the exits. Guards mobilized. But Jiho and Ara stood frozen, still connected, still processing the bond. Through their link, they both felt the same determination. The Krell thought they could destroy what they'd built. The Krell were wrong. We need to get you to safety, a guard said, reaching for Ara. No, she said firmly. We need to get to the command center. Together. The guard started to protest, but Ara's tone left no room for argument. She and Jiho ran through the corridors of the ship, their bond allowing them to move in perfect coordination. When they burst into the command center, they found Taman and the senior Veltharan officers coordinating the defense. 3 Krell assault ships, Taman reported. They're targeting the Veltharan vessel and Meridian 7. They want to take out both the bonded pair and the alliance talks in one strike. Our shields are holding, a Veltharan officer added. But we're outgunned. Jiho felt Ara's strategic mind working through the bond. She was analyzing battle patterns, calculating trajectories, looking for weaknesses. He added his own observations, his scientific knowledge of energy systems and structural vulnerabilities. Together, through the bond, they saw something no one else could see. There, they said simultaneously, pointing to the same spot on the tactical display. The lead ship has an exposed coolant port. If we can hit it with a focused beam, the chain reaction will disable their weapons array. Ara finished. Taman and the Veltharan commander looked at them, then at each other. How did you— The bond, Jiho explained quickly. We're thinking together, seeing things neither of us would see alone. The Veltharan commander made a quick decision. All batteries target coordinates Delta 73. Focused beam. Maximum intensity. The ship shuddered as weapons fired. On the screen, the Krell lead vessel's shields flickered and failed. Their weapons went offline. The other two Krell ships, seeing their leader disabled, broke off and retreated. The command center erupted in cheers. But Jiho and Ara just looked at each other, awed by what they'd accomplished together. Through the bond, they had merged their different ways of thinking into something greater than either of them alone. Hyerin, the young council member, approached them slowly. I witnessed the bonding ceremony and the battle. I saw what you can do together. She looked directly at Ara. The council will try to suppress this. They'll say it's a dangerous precedent, but I think it's the future. For the first time since this began, Jiho allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they were building something. The empathic bond changed everything. Jiho woke each morning feeling Ara's presence at the edge of his consciousness, a warmth that hadn't been there before. When she was calm, he felt settled. When she was anxious, his chest tightened. It was like having another heartbeat inside his own. Ara felt it too. She contacted him privately the day after the trial of shared suffering, appearing on his personal comm screen looking exhausted and uncertain. I can feel you, she said without preamble, even now across the distance between our ships. I can feel your curiosity and your concern for me. This shouldn't be possible. But it is possible, Jiho replied. We're proof of that. My people don't know what to make of it. The council has called in scientists from 3 different worlds. They're trying to understand how a human and a Veltharan could form an empathic bond when our neurologies are completely different. Maybe different isn't the same as incompatible, Jiho suggested. Ara's expression softened slightly. That's a very human way of thinking. Over the next week, both human and Veltharan scientists descended on Meridian 7. Minho, a brilliant human neuroscientist, worked alongside Seol, a Veltharan biologist who turned out to be Ara's childhood friend. Jiho and Ara became subjects of constant study, scanned and tested and analyzed until they both grew tired of the prodding. But the results were fascinating. Minho explained it to Jiho one evening in the lab, his hands waving excitedly as he spoke. Your brain is adapting in real time, Minho said, pulling up neural scans on the screen. Humans have this incredible neurological flexibility. We form new pathways quickly, we adapt. That's how we learn languages, develop skills, recover from injuries. But we've never seen it work like this before. Like what? You're literally growing new neural structures to accommodate the bond with Ara. Your brain is building bridges to connect with a completely alien consciousness. It's like learning a new language, except the language is pure emotion and shared experience. Jiho studied the scans, seeing the bright spots where his brain had changed. Is it permanent? We don't know, Minho admitted. But probably. Neural pathways tend to strengthen with use, and you're using these constantly. On the Veltharan ship, Seol was telling Ara something similar. The two friends sat in Ara's quarters, the biologist reviewing data on her tablet. Your neural chemistry has shifted, Seol said. You're producing compounds we normally only see during deep meditation or profound connection rituals. But it's constant now, not occasional. The human is affecting you on a biological level. I know, Ara said quietly. I can feel it. Seol looked up from her tablet, her expression troubled. The council is afraid. This bond between you and the human, it proves something they don't want to accept. That humans might be able to connect with any species. That they might be able to unite the fractured civilizations of the galaxy in ways we never could. That should be celebrated, not feared, Ara protested. Should be, yes, but the council sees it as a threat to Veltharan dominance. If humans can bridge the gaps between species, what do they need us for? Seol set down her tablet. Ara, there's something else. The Krell Dominion has been monitoring the situation. They're not happy about this development. Ara felt a chill run through her. The Krell were a hostile faction that had been watching human expansion with increasing concern. They saw humanity's rapid growth and adaptation as dangerous. This news would only make things worse. Through the bond, Jiho felt Ara's sudden spike of fear. He was in his quarters on Meridian 7, about to sleep, but the emotion jolted him awake. He reached for his comm without thinking. What's wrong? He asked the moment Ara's image appeared. She blinked in surprise. You felt that? The bond is getting stronger. I can feel when something upsets you. What happened? Ara explained about the Krell, about the political implications of their bond, about the Council's growing unease. Jiho listened, feeling the weight of it all settling on his shoulders. So what do we do? He asked when she finished. I don't know. The Council wants me to make a choice, complete the bonding ritual and accept you as my partner, which would make me an outcast in traditional society. Or break the bond and maintain my position. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. They're pressuring me to choose duty over personal connection. What do you want? Jiho asked. Ara was silent for a long moment. I want to know what happens if we continue. I want to see where this bond leads, but I'm afraid of what it will cost. I'm afraid too, Jiho admitted. But I think the things worth having are usually the things that scare us. A small smile crossed Ara's face. More human wisdom? Common sense wisdom, Jiho corrected. Fear just means something matters enough to be worth protecting. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert. Dami's voice came over Jiho's comm, sharp with urgency. Jiho, get to the command center, now. He found Commander Taemin, Dami, and several other officers gathered around a screen displaying a decoded message. The room's tension was thick enough to cut. What's going on? Jiho asked. Intelligence intercept from Krell space, Taemin said grimly. They're planning something. We don't have all the details, but your name and Ara's came up multiple times. Dami pulled up a translation. They see the human Velthuran bond as a threat that needs to be eliminated. They're talking about a covert operation. Jiho felt his blood run cold. Through the bond, he felt Ara's matching fear. She was receiving similar intelligence on her ship. They're going to try to kill us, Jiho said flatly. We don't know that for certain, Taemin hedged. But his expression said he believed it too. Jiho's comm chimed. Ara's face appeared on his personal screen, visible only to him. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was determination there too. The Council just informed me of the threat, she said. They're recommending I return to Velthuran space immediately for protection. They want to end the trials, break the bond, and cut all contact with humans until the Krell situation is resolved. And what did you tell them? Jiho asked. Ara's chin lifted slightly. I told them I'm not running. I told them that if the Krell see our bond as a threat, then maybe that means we're doing something important. Something that could actually change things. Jiho felt a surge of pride through the bond, and he realized it wasn't his pride. It was Ara's pride in herself for standing firm. The feeling made him smile. The 6th trial, he said suddenly. When is it supposed to happen? Tomorrow. But given the circumstances, the Council might postpone. Don't let them. Jiho interrupted. We keep going. We show the Krell and the Council and everyone else that we're not afraid, that this bond is real and strong and worth defending. Through the screen, Ara stared at him with those silver-flecked eyes. Then she nodded slowly. You're right. We keep going. That night, Jiho couldn't sleep. The empathic bond hummed with both his and Ara's anxiety. Somewhere on her ship, she was probably lying awake too. Feeling the same fears and hopes tangled together, he thought about the journey that had brought him here, from a curious xenobiologist who just wanted to understand alien life to someone connected to another being in ways he'd never imagined possible. He thought about his parents who had died exploring new worlds and wondered if they would be proud of what he was doing. Through the bond, he felt a pulse of warmth. Ara, reaching out across the distance, offering comfort. He sent back his own reassurance and felt her settle slightly. They were in this together now. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The 6th trial would test their commitment. The Krell threat would test their courage. But Jiho was beginning to realize that the real test had been happening all along. The test of whether two beings from completely different worlds could truly see each other, know each other, and choose to stay connected despite all the reasons to pull apart. So far, they were passing, and Jiho intended to keep it that way. In the darkness of his quarters, feeling Ara's presence in his mind like a second heartbeat, Jiho finally drifted into sleep. His dreams were strange and beautiful, filled with silver-flecked eyes and the sensation of being truly, deeply known. When he woke, the sun was rising over the planet below, and somewhere on the Veltheran ship Ara was waking too. Through the bond they greeted each other without words. Today would bring new challenges. The sixth trial awaited. The Krell threat loomed. The political pressure mounted, but they were ready. Together they were ready for anything.